Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Real Life, Real Kitchen podcast. So, overarching topics of this podcast are family, food, and community. And this week, I'm going to be talking about one of the most significant families, the royal family. So, that definitely comes under the umbrella. And I have as my guest today, Kerry Parnell. She's a freelance journalist who writes for UK, Australian, and US newspapers and magazines, covering royal issues and topics, travel and lifestyle. She's a co-editor of the Royal List newsletter and the British Travel List. So all the links are in the show notes, so you can find out a little bit more about her. But Kerry has had an awful lot of experience as an observer, commentator. I would say, I don't like the word amateur historian, but a keen interest in historical context as well. Kerry, a little bit of a start because you began in lifestyle magazines in the 1990s. Is this correct? How did you shift
Yes.
across to royalty?
So I edited teenage magazines back in their heyday and women's fashion magazines. And then I moved into newspapers later on. And when I was on the Telegraph newspaper in Sydney, in Australia, it was around the time of the Queen. I think it was 2015, and the Queen had just become the longest reigning British monarch. So my great editor just went, "Oh, I need a 50-page pull out by 3 days' time about the Queen's reign. You can do it," to me, because I did oversee all the features, and then I was also British, so that was my qualification. But I do love the history and heritage side of the royals, and so I ended up going down a rabbit hole of content, writing enormous special commemorative issues and pullouts and magazines and things about the coronation and uh, the Queen's death and the King's coronation. And so I actually found that I really enjoy that side of it, particularly the history.
Yeah, so putting things, because I suppose in terms of the royals, we have had a busy decade, 15 years or so, with diamond jubilees, silver. I'm losing track of the jubilees, but various jubilees, babies, been a lot of babies,
Yeah,
marriages, so big weddings, and then obviously death of the Queen, coronation. So it has been busy.
yeah.
And coming back to your point about the Queen being the longest reigning monarch in British and English history, um, to have that transition, so you've got her funeral and then the coronation, there's a lot of kind of cultural context that people have lost since she became queen in the early 50s. So a lot of people are not necessarily going to be quite so familiar with the pomp and circumstance and the ceremony. So that must have been, how did you find that kind of conveying that across to your audience?
Oh, it's really fascinating because when firstly, she didn't expect to be queen, and was only queen because her father had to become king when his brother Edward VIII abdicated in 1936. So very unexpectedly, suddenly the crown went to that side of the family, and her destiny completely changed. She only saw herself before that as a lady living in the country with dogs and horses, she said.
Lovely.
Um, yeah. So, then she not only that, but then her father died, much younger than they expected as well. So she ended up taking the throne. As at the time, her and Prince Philip were seen as super glamorous. They were like Hollywood stars. They were really young, um, and Britain was going through an immense period of change post-war. So they, on the one hand, they needed this wonderful pomp and circumstance of the wedding, but on the other hand, they were quite concerned that, about the image it portrayed when there was still rationing and things like that. So it was huge. It was a huge her royal wedding, and her subsequent coronation, which was the first coronation to be beamed live on TV.
Yes,
Um,
we forget that, don't we, actually?
yeah, and then she made a big, quite a seismic speech, which was the first televised speech, Christmas speech in the early 50s. And she said, and I always like this one because she goes on about it's such a period of change and it's hard to know what to hold on to and what to let go. And people feel really concerned with the pace of change the country was going through. And, that really resonates today.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's huge. It's another case of history repeating, isn't it, a little bit?
yeah,
I think your point about the television is an important one, because before that would have been radio for a couple of decades, which would have been kind of the first sort of opportunity that people would have heard the king and members of the royalty, members of the royal family. Before that, newspapers. Before that, it would have been the, I'm just thinking, like the satirical prints and things of the 18th century. But other than that, it's, for the general public to be aware of what's going on, it's a relatively recent phenomenon.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically, as soon as you got TV cameras, um, then and obviously then in the 2000s, once we got the internet and social media, um, the the separation of the royal family, and actually Hollywood stars and everybody else, just basically started to diminish. And so they were, it didn't it happened over decades. But where we are now is there's really no line. They live in more of a fishbowl than they ever have done. There's not really much opportunity for the royal family to sort of have that much privacy. And in the end, they just sort of manage their own, image and what they want to say to the public by, as you see, people like the Princess of Wales doing all of her nature videos, and the King and Catherine both put out some videos on Instagram for World Cancer Day this week about their cancer journey and how, what their well wishes to everybody going through it. Well, I mean, all of this is, if you think back to when the Queen began her reign, it would have been unthinkable to even talk like that about yourself, but also talk directly to people about it.
Yeah. 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 What, because again, the thought strikes me, it's a regular family with all of the upheaval and the dynamics of the dodgy uncle, the slightly awkward in-laws, all of these kind of things, or just kind of the family dynamics of characters not getting on, others getting on. So you've got all of that, but they do have these extra pressures. So there's the publicity to begin with. But what other responsibilities? Because this is the thing, we sort of see the royals and we go, oh, kind of the king's in charge of things, but not really. What are the extra responsibilities and pressures that they have that Joe Blogg's public would not have?
Well, basically, my theory is that once we got social media, and like I said before about, our previous stars used to be very separate. They used to be able to control their image, control the stories that came out about them. Now, obviously, in the past, royals or any kind of celebrities, of course, they weren't the most moral people that lived on what they might have been, but they might also not have been.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, the things that they did in their private life were managed and were sort of, kept out of the public eye. In one way, because they, had great big PR teams, but in the other way, I think that, to destroy that illusion would have been something that people didn't really want back in the 50s. So now we have no barriers, and now they live their life completely in the public eye, but also as the last remaining kind of real, pure other celebrities, if you know what I mean, celebrities that are on an other plane. So they still live in palaces. They still have, they have this mystique about them. And more than that is because they're born into a role, they regenerate. So there's always a new generation of royals to follow. And with that, there seems to be, it's very interesting. There's increasing interest in them, not decreasing, even though you might argue that, in modern days, why would anybody be interested in the royal family? But that's not how it's going. In fact, you wait till Prince George is 18 and Lilibet, there's be an American princess, which America probably hasn't entirely woken up to yet, but they're going to have their own princess, and the interest in them will never go away. So it's massive pressure on them. I mean, who would want that?
Mm.
I can't, nobody. It's a very unique pressure, and they have to live with that and then navigate all their own personal relationships, in a way that, in the best possible way. They don't, obviously, depending on which member of the family you're thinking about, they either try to do it with the Queen, which was, never explain, never complain, with her attitude, her mantra, or they might go full Prince Harry and put all the dirty washing on the line for everyone to see and go no contact and everything else. And, so yeah, they have all the same family dynamics, but it's an enormous challenge how to navigate it.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking as well, you've got this, you're born into a role and there is a huge responsibility with it, particularly if you're the firstborn. We're going to bring in primogeniture here. You're the firstborn. You've got the responsibility of the nation. You've got the kind of the practical, dare I say, business responsibilities of properties, estates, the people who live on them and who work on them. There is very much a sense that you've been handed the baton of history and then you need to steward it and then hand that on again. So you've got that, which would just be huge in any family, and then all the pressure of the publicity on top of that. No, so
Yes,
it's
but
about
they're
idea of
also,
legacy.
yes, but then interestingly, it's also slightly, imagine if you were in your family, if the firstborn was like, they're destined to take over the family business, and you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't seem super fair. And then not only that, but they get all the land and all the, the title that comes with loads of land and loads of and money, financial gain. And then you're the whether you're the spare heir or further down the line, of course they're not, no, they're not left short, but it's not really fairly, it's not a normal situation where you might all go into the business. You might be a working royal, but you've been brought up in the spotlight, and then and then basically there is, depending how far down, there is also a sort of attitude of like, well, get on with it then, off you go. So it's a difficult thing to wrap your head around.
So it's interesting. I heard a fascinating argument the other day, which was talking about why primogeniture drove the economic success of late medieval Tudor and even early modern England, because all the finances and all the responsibility, the land would go to number one, which would mean that unless number two or three went into the priesthood, it was very much, you have to make your own way in the world. And that will be known from a very young age, that it's over to you. We'll catch you if you fall, maybe, but you need to make your way in the world, which led to this kind of class group of sort of quite ambitious, entrepreneurial younger siblings, men obviously, who would say, right, well, I'm not going to get anything. I'll make the most of all the training, the education, and the connections I have being born into this family, but I have to make my way into the world. I don't know, sort of, I suppose I quite like that. I quite like that sense of go forth and create good things, and it's sort of from you. But
Except some of them would just became dissolute, didn't they?
Yes,
And didn't do that at
because
all.
they weren't prepared properly. It was like, "You go do that. By the way, here's a potload of money," even though you got holes in your hands and a penchant for the ladies. Yes.
So, I mean, exactly, like even in history with, you would be brought up to be, you're in an aristocratic family, you've got titles, you've got grandeur, you live in an enormous house, and then you have no money and you just supposedly get on with it. And I can see that it would be really difficult. And even worse if you were female, because then you actually got kicked out.
Mm, mm,
You just had to get married or just go away,
yeah.
frankly.
Bring back the
So
convents. Bring back the convents, Kerry. It all went wrong with the Reformation.
but this is the last sort of remnants of that, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's um, but it's an interesting one. I don't, I, c- I mean, you have somebody like Princess Anne who decided right from the start she was, the best queen we've never had. She's so absolutely no nonsense, gets on with it. Has been one of the hardest working royal for
Mm,
decades. And she just, realized her place. She's a working royal. She does her job. She has a lovely home. She brought up a family, but she very much decided from the start that her children would be clear about what, they are. They're on the periphery of the royal family. Um, but they, she didn't give them titles and they were clear they had to make a living and they have done.
yeah. 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 To go forth and be successful on their own terms. Yeah. It's interesting as well. You mentioned earlier about how Queen Elizabeth was not expecting, her side of the family were not expecting this responsibility. And that happened with Queen Victoria as well. When William IV died, they went, "What? He has no children. Who are we going to pick?" And that left Victoria. And that must also be a hugely interesting dynamic to have all you're aware you're peripheral, you're part of this bigger picture, but then to be thrust into the limelight and go, "Oh, I haven't quite had the preparation, the training for this, but this is what needs to happen." That's another big pressure that must come about.
Yes, absolutely. And so, they, I mean, the Queen's father was famously that's what the King's speech is about because he famously had a stammer, and so he literally couldn't speak. He didn't want to do it. He was, and when he did take the throne, because of the massive scandal. I mean, we think we do have scandals now. We're going through another period of royal scandal, but I mean, think of the scandal of Edward.
Mm.
You know, the abdication, and then after that, his basically colluding with the Nazis in the war. I mean, it's
Yes.
just unbelievable. I mean, talk about royal problem. So he and the Queen Mother were really, their whole mission was stability, stability, stability. They stayed in London during the war. She would go and wear all her furs and her pearls and stand on the bombed ruins of the houses, and people loved her for it because she wanted to show that they're not leaving. They're there for everybody, as incongruous as that sounds. And so they instilled that in the Queen as well, that it just had to be all about stability. And so we did have a period of, well, a long period of stability until we started getting in the 90s with all the divorces and Diana's death and everything. But
What do you think?
yeah,
What do you think happened at that point? Do you think it's kind of the pressure of the media, the spotlight on these young, because they would have been in their 20s or so during the 1970s, kind of that pressure still being encouraged to marry well, even though it wasn't necessarily the right person. What it just all sort of falls apart a
um,
bit. Because
yeah, there was,
Edward's the only one who stayed married. He's still married to Sophie,
yeah,
isn't he? And the other
yeah,
3 have all
yeah.
had divorce. What's happened? What happened,
Well,
Kerry?
um, I mean, Anne just, married and then it didn't work out, and then married happily after that. So it was just a sort of coincidence that it was all at the same time. Diana, yeah, there was pressure on Charles to get married, and obviously he he should have married Camilla
Yeah.
right at the start. But the family times have changed massively since then. And, even when they did finally marry, they had to marry in the Guildhall in, Windsor because, they were divorced, So, but now then obviously fast forward to Prince Harry getting married, he just had the full white wedding in St. George's Chapel, and it didn't matter that Meghan was divorced. So things have completely moved on, and I think a lot of those pressures that were put upon them have gone. So that was due to the time. But yes, I mean, that it's a shame it's a terrible tragedy about Diana. So, and then with Andrew and Sarah, they were, there was a lot. I mean, there was an enormous amount of pressure on them at the time, but leading to their separation. But then again, they, um, the decisions that they have both made in their life in the past are now coming out with all the Epstein
Mm.
files and things like that. So I don't know. That's it's an interesting thing about kind of how you decide to live your life, and whether you decide to live your life in a way that you think will never be found out,
Mm.
or you actually choose to live your life in a way that is, wouldn't matter if someone found out. They're two different things, aren't they?
So you need to choose between virtue and not virtue, even though the virtue can be harder. I'm just thinking of, things like temperance, prudence, which is hard. It's hard. I mean, even, normal people, we struggle with that. But yeah, it's, I think what's been very interesting the past few days with, as you were saying, these awful Epstein things is how light will shine in the darkness. Might not be straight away, but you can't hide these things ultimately. They come out. Dinner's burning, the washing's multiplying, and someone's crying. It could even be you. If your evenings feel like survival mode, the Command the Chaos Mum Life Management Planner is your first gentle step back to calm. It's a printable 80-page guide and planner to help you reset your routines and breathe again without needing to become someone else entirely. Start your reset today. The link's in the show notes.
I mean, obviously in the past, I suppose they stayed hidden, but um, yeah, it's just everybody makes mistakes. There's
Yes, no,
there's
absolutely,
not a
absolutely.
perfect person on the planet at all, and no way, and I don't think that there's a place for piling on
Mm.
to people that do make mistakes either. But I think we need to, you know, be more forgiving. However, um, just reading all of the information that's coming out, and knowing, about taking loans from a convicted paedophile
Yeah.
right then, and still going back for more money. Well, we can, I'm sure most of us normal people can reflect that, no, we wouldn't have made that decision. So, there are decisions and decisions.
Yeah. Oy, oy, oy. It's, blech, blech. Thinking about sort of the secrecy around things, I'm gonna go back even further to the, early 18th and then 17th century, when you would have very, very little personal privacy for the royal family, particularly king or the queen, because it was almost like the court. Correct me, I'm just thinking back to my kind of days of studying history, but have the king or the queen at the center of the court. And depending on the power and the influence of the aristocracy around, they could have roles, for example, helping the king out of bed of the morning, being the first person they saw, helping them with their clothing, getting dressed. There was a real kind of intimacy there. Um, so the more kind of trusted and powerful you were physically, you were very, very close to royalty. So there's a lot of things there where, yeah, very little privacy in a way
Yes.
we cannot even conceive of.
No, it's interesting if you go round, if you take a tour of any of the palaces, like Kensington Palace, the old palace part of Kensington Palace, or Hampton Court particularly, you will see the flow of the room seems you're like, but I don't understand why do they all lead on from one another? Why is there so many corridors? And that's because the court, we can't hardly believe it now, but the court would be literally outside of the Queen's apartments or the King's apartments. And so the monarch's apartments were sort of hidden within the palace. And then there were all these antechambers outside, which were packed with people. And like you say, then they also had all of their ladies in waiting or their king, the king, what was it? The master of the stool and
Yeah,
things like
groom
that.
of the stool.
Yes.
Groom of
So
the
they, to
Yeah,
help them get dressed, they
just
knew
for those
they
who are
knew
listening, I just want to say stool, we're not talking about something we sit on. We're talking about something that you get a sample of today to check your microbiome. That's what we're talking about.
yeah,
That level
yeah,
of intimacy.
yeah. So they knew what was wrong with them. They knew, everything. Yeah, they knew everything about them. But then it was, you know, so it's an interesting thing because now we say they live their life in the public eye, but that was physically in the public, but then a small amount of the public, an
Yeah,
accepted amount of the public.
yeah,
Um, so, and, they would be, you had to have the, Home Secretary, I think, there at the birth of a royal baby, right up to the Queen. It was the Queen who said, "I'm not having that, thank you."
yeah, yeah,
I think when she was born, um, they sat just outside of the
yeah,
room, but before that, they were in the room
yeah.
checking that they hadn't done things like swap the babies or brought one in and things like that. So, yeah,
Oh,
unbelievable.
oh, just grim, just grim. This is quite wow. Yeah, you're giving up a lot, and that's a lot of the mentality to go. This is service. This is for the nation. This is for. It's like this utter sacrifice of self. Um, however, what there would have been a sense of I have a divine authority to be here. God has put me in this
Yeah,
place. And
yeah,
I have been given all this wealth and this privilege, and with it comes responsibility. Again, ideas of stewardship, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that must have been a sucker for some. By sucker, I
yeah.
mean support, not you're an idiot. Different sort of sucker. But yeah, that takes a certain sort of mind and character and disposition to I'm not sure anybody could really thrive in this, but to make a success of this and
Yeah.
emerge with vaguely stable children that you could hand this on to?
Well, they didn't do, did they? So, I mean, that's what the aim is constantly to achieve. And I think I predict that will change more, um, once William and Catherine take the throne, and then the throne that George, if he does actually, if he takes it, because I think it will change inevitably. I think, um, and it wouldn't be, I think in the future, it wouldn't be such a scandal if, so one of the heirs decided they didn't want to do it and passed it on to the other or something like that. I do feel that it will modernize in that way.
So it is almost like more of a business in that you are going, right, you actually have the gifts for this. You have the temperament. You have the, yes, I want to do this and take it on.
Yeah, I mean, the way the crown passes is still to the firstborn, although the Queen changed it so that it now is the firstborn, not the first male
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if I can see that it would change, and I can see that they would view it as very much a career,
Hmm.
sort of a unusual career. But I mean, they can, if you want to do it, they can. It is still we're going through such a period of turmoil worldwide, and there is still an argument that you know when the King or William or Catherine come out, they can cross boundaries that we probably they don't have the same feeling that we do with our politicians, for example. They do quite a good a lot of good internationally. So there is a role for them. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it changes in the next sort of few decades.
And as well, they are bringing a stability in a world where we talked about celebrities earlier. That, celebrities are kind of gone within a generation. Songs that were popular when we were teenagers, our kids aren't going to know what they are, much less our grandchildren. Whereas the royals have that is that line of continuity running through
Yeah,
in a
I
way.
mean, what we've got now is we've got most of the biggest celebrities are when we used to have Hollywood icons. They've made way now for social media ones or YouTubers for the young, for Gen Z. So now they've chosen to do this, so it's really interesting. They've chosen to give away all of their privacy and their um for that future. So yeah, it is different. So that's why I feel like the royals are the only kind of true celebrities left.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Just same, but very, very different.
Yeah.
Very different. Yeah. I mean, God bless them, but not for all the tea in China. No, thank you. No, thank you. Really hard, really hard. Now, I have a question from all your kind of observing and writing about this. Also, I'd like to say for all the listeners that Kerry has a podcast called Secrets of the Royals, where she goes into sort of um, as almost case studies. You're looking at individual family members, some of the secrets of the royals. So that'd be well worth having a listen to. Again, I'll put all the details in the show notes. But because of your kind of breadth of observational experience, for your Joe Blogs public mum, what is a good takeaway from the royal family, and what is a please don't ever do this takeaway that you could give to the mothers listening?
Well, I think that the Princess of Wales has made it her mission to really try to promote um, the early years of childhood education and support. It's often people are like, oh, what is it? What does that mean? But what she's really trying to promote, and it is actually really important, is that you can build the building blocks of your child's life are made in the years before 5, and how nurturing and caring and reading to them and, talking to them, building verbal skills and reading skills and all of those sort of things. And mostly just showing them um, love and continuous love, that how that actually will make a massive difference to your child's life. And so I really feel people should pay more attention to that, because it is actually super important in a period where a lot of the services that we used to have, the community services that we used to have in those areas, like the early childhood centres and midwives and things like that, have gone. So I do feel that she is saying something really important there. I think the lesson, the lessons I would try to unlearn would be things like, uh, basically, don't, don't show. We've learned a lot since the Queen era of being a parent, where she just sort of went on a 9-month tour of Australia and New Zealand, just left Charles,
Mm.
goodbye,
He
darling.
was like
And
6 months old or a year old or something. I was just like, oh wow.
yeah, but repeatedly as well. She used to go to Malta for Christmas when Philip was stationed there, when Charles was a baby, and just leave him, and it was, I mean, it must have just been there was a bit of, she wasn't supposed to travel with the direct air, but also, as soon as Charles and Diana had children, they stopped that and
Yeah,
traveled with their children.
yeah.
And then again, William and Kate did too. So, I mean, yeah, like that's a good thing to have waved goodbye to, that very cold parenting style where you just let your child get on with it and that's it, and don't really give them love. And that and don't listen to the kind of child they are, which so Charles super struggled at school
He was,
because they
I mean, I look at
yeah,
him, here we go, this is like pop psychology. But, I mean, with Charles, I look at him, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what a sensitive chap who just needed kind of quiet, books, a little bit of art." He
yeah,
really should not have been sent to Gordonston where they were charging around like lunatics in the ice cold. So Gordonston is one of the, public schools, big premier boarding schools here in the UK, up in Scotland, and it was quite famed. I don't know what it's like now, but it used to be sort of up at early morning in January and going for cold runs for 5 miles in the snow. This sort of character building stuff, which is what Philip, his father, had had, and
he loved it.
he loved it, but for Philip was interesting because his family had, when I say fallen apart, because he was in some ways, now was his mother Danish? No, his mother was Greek. I can't remember, but you probably remember better than I with Philip because his family were quite scattered and there wasn't the stability. Boarding school, it was that
Yeah.
stability.
Yeah, he basically didn't have any relationship with his parents, and so he was a prince of Europe, and he got sent he was all his sisters married Germans, and then obviously the war happened. So he was just sent to Gordonston, and he loved it. He thrived on it. I
Mm.
suppose it gave him structure.
Yeah.
But interestingly, Andrew and Edward went there too, and they were all right. And it's just it's about listening. So that would be an example is listen to the kind of child you have and what kind of school that they would really thrive in. That
Yeah.
would be a good tip.
Yeah.
Um, and then, I mean, other than that, I think, I think that their parenting has changed. Diana made a big, big point of parenting how she wanted because she was brought up in she was brought up in a family where she was pretty starved of
Yeah,
parental
it was
love
an
as
awful
well.
divorce and all of this, and it was,
Yeah,
yeah, it was all, oh,
and so she set about to do the opposite of that, and so she would, she parented, she would hug and kiss her boys and absolutely loved them more than anything in the world. Took them you know, to theme parks and wanted them to have as normal childhood as possible and smothered them in love, which is so, there's a great legacy. So, I mean, yeah, parent like that, but, I don't know. I mean, they haven't really, having said that, they haven't put the relationship Harry and, William have, is completely, fallen apart. So like I say, it just comes back to they're just a normal family,
they're a
really.
normal family, and as soon as people start getting married, you've got extra people to factor into the dynamics,
Yeah.
and things can change. Things can change. So, yeah, tricky, tricky, tricky. Kerry, thank you. You've given certainly me much food for thought, much to consider. Where can people find out more? People will go, I must know more about these royals, and it's just very interesting. And obviously, the historian in me is like, they're just fascinating. Where can people find out more about you and the work you do?
So the best, we have a Substack newsletter, which is really popular, called The Royal List, that, 3 words.
I like that.
And so yes.
Not a Civil
So
War reference, no.
no, we're not. No, we actually bring you the, curated royal news every Sunday that you need. So it's a list of royal news we're 2 journalists. It's myself and my co-editor, Maria Cool, and we're both, experienced newspaper journalists, so you can trust what we write. It's not clickbait.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you can read it there. That would be the best place to go.
And you have a bit of a kind of, from that, because the royal family have been around in various guises since what? Alfred? So we're talking 8th century here. It's a long old time. That has had quite an impact on the geography, the culture, the buildings of Britain. And as a result, you've kind of expanded out into British travel, haven't you? So I know that's another kind of pet passion of yours. where can people find out more about that side of things?
Yes, so it sparked an absolute love of British
Mm.
heritage and also, British history and heritage and the countryside, particularly because I'd lived in Australia for about 15 years. And when I came back, I was just like, I just loved everything about it. I couldn't get enough of the history. So the British Travel List is the sister site to the Royal List on Substack as well. So have a look there. That's doing really well. And we've got Instagram and Facebook pages on the same thing. So I'm also excitingly this year branching off that again and doing book travel, British book.
Oh, love it. So like
So,
literary
yes,
experience in
yeah.
like the places.
So I just came back from Yorkshire on the trail of Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights, which was just pretty much my dream trip, really, driving around the Yorkshire moors in the mist in January. Pretty fab.
Love it. I love it. Um, I mean, I lived in Australia for a while and I knew that I needed to come back to Europe. I think the longest I was away was about 18 months. Two things. Number one, I went up to Sydney and in the Rocks, which is like the oldest European part. And you've got these buildings from about, I don't know, 1805. So bog standard Georgian ones. And I looked at them, I went, oh, they're so old. And I went, oh. So that was the first thing. And then I went to the sing along Sound of Music, which was great. Opening scenes coming over Salzburg and the beautiful mountains and the old cathedrals and the buildings. And I went, oh, I think I need to go back. The kangaroos are not enough. I need more. So yes, I know that sense of longing for land, place, culture, history, and it all comes together. It all comes together. So particularly for all the Americans who are listening, because I know you love this. Can you just follow Kerry, please? She's brilliant. So
Yes, and I also do a big sideline in afternoon teas, which are extremely popular with my American readers.
but I
They
love
love
it.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off. Very
Yes.
civilized. Very civilized. Right, ladies, because it's mainly ladies who are listening to this, let's be honest. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. Could you please do me a favor? Like, share, subscribe, comments below. Share this with anybody you know would love to hear a little bit more about the royal family. And I'd be really grateful and just help this Real Life, Real Kitchen podcast gently grow. So thank you so much. Kerry, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Love the podcast and want to help keep the kettle on? You can support the show. Think of it like buying me a cup of tea or helping cover the cost of the biscuits. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for keeping this kitchen conversation going.